ॐ भूर्भुवः स्वः तत्सवितुर्वरेण्यं भर्गो देवस्य धीमहि धियो यो नः प्रचोदयात्। ॐ सहना भवतु सहनौ भुनक्तु सह वीर्यं करवावहै तेजस्विनावधीतमस्तु मा विद्विषावहै। ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः। श्रुतिस्मृतिपुराणानाम् आलयं करुणालयं नमामि भगवत्पाद शङ्करं लोकशङ्करं। शङ्करं शङ्कराचार्यं केशवं बादरायणं सूत्रभाष्यकृतौ वन्दे भगवन्तौ पुनः पुनः। ॐ त्वमेव माता च पिता त्वमेव त्वमेव बन्धुश्च सखा त्वमेव त्वमेव विद्या द्रविणं त्वमेव सर्वं मम देव देव। ओम गुरुदेव भगवान शिव शंकर भोलेनाथ कैलाशपति महाराज की जय। भगवान व्यास जी महाराज की जय। शंकराचार्य भगवान की जय। स्वामी चिन्मयानंद भगवान की जय। स्वामी दयानंद भगवान की जय। स्वामी प्रबुद्धानंद भगवान की जय। स्वामी शुद्धानंद भगवान की जय। स्वामी साध्वी आनंद ज्योति जी की जय। सभी गुरु देवताओं की जय। माता पिता की जय। सभी गुरु देवताओं की जय। सभी गुरु देवताओं की जय। श्री कृष्ण गोविंद हरे मुरारी हे नाथ नारायण वासुदेवा। श्री कृष्ण गोविंद हरे मुरारी हे नाथ नारायण वासुदेवा। श्रीमद् भगवद गीता चैप्टर 6 verse number 13 and 14. In last verse number 11 and 12, Bhagwan explained where to sit and with what to sit in meditation. Where to sit in a clean place. A place where you sit for meditation should be clean. This is Yoga Dhyaya. The chapter 6 is about meditation. Dhyana Yoga. This chapter is about Dhyana Yoga. In this chapter, Bhagwan is explaining about how to meditate. Meditation in verse number 13 and 14, Bhagwan is explaining about sitting posture and object of meditation. What should be the object of meditation and the nature of meditator. What is the nature of meditator? Let us read this verse. समं कायशिरो ग्रीवं धार्यन्नचलं स्थिरः सम्प्रेक्ष्य नासिकाग्रं स्वं दिशः च अन्वलोक्यन्। And 14th verse is प्रशांतात्मा विगतिभिः ब्रह्मचारी व्रते स्थितः मनः संयम मच्चित्तः युक्त आसीत् मत्परः। काया शिरोग्रम, काया काया शिरोग्रीवहम, body, head, the body, the head, and grieve, neck. Samam, in one straight line. Achalam, without moving. Dharyan, holding. Sthirah, being firm. Sthirah. Swam naisargikam, the tip of the one's nose. Swaam naisargikam. Sampreksha, as though looking at this one line, looking at the nose tip. As though looking at. Disha cha, and direction. Anavalokan, lokyan, not looking. Parashant Atma, one whose mind is tranquil. Vigyat Bihi, one who is free from fear. Brahmachari Varte Sthitaha, being established in one's commitment to the life of Brahmachari. Manaha, mind. Samyamaya, withdrawing from everything else. Mat chitta, thinking of me. Me here means Brahman, thinking of Brahman. Mat paraha, having me as the ultimate goal. Yogi, meditator. Asita, may he sit. He or she. Holding oneself firm without moving. Keeping the body, head, neck in one straight line as though looking at one's nose or eye position and not looking in all direction. Being the one whose mind is tranquil, who is free from fear, established in one's commitment to the life of a brahmachari. May that meditator sit thinking of me, having me as the ultimate goal, while withdrawing the mind from everything else. To hold the body and neck in one straight line means not bend them in either way. In other words, you should sit erect for meditation. Sit straight. Sitting straight. But even though the body, head, and neck are vertical, you may sway on the rock a little, therefore. Krishna adds the word achalam, meaning that the body is to be kept still, and also sthira means that body is kept, the body meaning that you should be very firm in your seat. This means that prior to meditation, the legs and feet are placed in such a way that they do not require any kind of change. They should be relaxed and firm. Thus, there is both stillness and firmness in your seat of meditation. Does one really meditate on the tip of one's nose? This is the question. One's posture described in this verse bring out a certain attitude or disposition in the person that is conducive to meditation. This posture includes your gaze also. The expression looking at the tip of their nose, sampreksha naisargikam, naisakagaram. Nasikagram is something misunderstood to means that you should meditate on the tip of your nose. This is a misunderstanding. You don't meditate on your nose, tip of your nose. There are even two schools of thought of this. One saying you should meditate on the spot between your eyebrows, and the other saying that you should meditate on the tip of your nose itself, because it could be literally taken and therefore misunderstood. Shankara explains what Krishna means in this expression in his commentary of this verse. In explaining as the gaze, Krishna says, Sampreksha naisikagram, nasikagram, nasika agram. Looking at the tip of one's nose, it does not mean that you sit crossed eyes. You don't have to squint, cross your eyes. Rather, given a position of the eyes as they look out, they naturally fall or converge upon a particular point, and that is where they are to remain. It means you neither look up nor down. You look as though at your tip. You are not looking too high, you are not looking too down. You are looking as though your tip of your nose. This is just an posture. There is no technicality there. This is not going to lead in knowledge. Please understand. This is just an posture, a easiest way and easiest posture in which you can sit and meditate. Meditate. The posture should be so that you can concentrate on your topic. That should be the posture. Therefore, looking at one's nose is not what is being enjoined here by the expression sampreksha nasika agram, nasikagram. It simply addresses where the gaze should fall. This is explained by Shankara as follows. He says that there is a word iva here. The word sampreksha, looking, should be understood as though looking darshanam kartava iva. The eyes are not closed. In fact, they just look out in such a way that they do not look directly at any particular object, which is another way of avoiding distraction. Shankara questions what would happen if the person were asked to look at the tip of nose. Looking at the tip of nose, where would person's absorption be? At the tip of the nose, of course, which is not what is desired here at all. In contemplation, the mind is to be absorbed in Atma alone, and for this, your mind must be available. If you are busy looking at the tip of your nose, you are going to make use of the mind to contemplate upon Atma. Therefore, the object of meditation, dhyaya, is not the tip of the nose, but something entirely different, as we shall see. This is what is being explained here. You are not. The tip of the nose is not the object of meditation, because this is just an posture. If you open your eyes too wide, then you are going to look at some object and the mind will go on in that object. And if your eyes is closed, then you will have memories in the mind. Your mind will go there in the memories. So eyes should be so at a place where there is no distraction. It is open so that you are neither closed your eyes nor you are open to any object. This means you are not open to the objects. All objects are gone. And even tip of the nose is gone, because you are not going to think about tip of the nose. You don't have to be with the nose. Then you will start seeing, oh, if this nose could have been little slightly higher, would have been easier for me to see it. Shankaracharya ji also clarify Krishna's word Disha Anavalokayan as meaning not looking at a particular direction. When you are sitting in meditation, it is possible to look to the left or to the right or in front or to the back as well as up and down. Krishna already covered the possibility of looking up and down here by saying Samam Kaya Siro Griva Dharayan, keeping the body, head and neck in one straight line. Since you can also look to the left and right, why not meditate that way? Because you will develop a pain in the neck. So to avoid such discomfort, the position for meditation was established. Sitting outwardly in meditation is one thing, but there is also another sitting involved, an inner sitting. The inner sitting is what is meant by meditation and is what is referred by the word mata chitta, mata paraha. Having already talked about the place of meditation, the seat itself, and the sitting posture, Bhagwan points out the object of meditation and also the nature of the meditator here. In fact, there are not many verses in Gita that talk about meditation as such, whereas the meditator is talked about a lot. If you look at the entire Gita, you will find only one or two other sentences on meditation itself. In verse number 6, chapter number 6, verse number 25, we will see there. The emphasis throughout the Gita is on meditator. Who is the one who meditates is what makes the difference between a successful meditation and an unsuccessful one. A mere act of meditation. The present verse also talks a lot about the meditator, referring to the person as Prashant Atma, one for whom Atma, the mind, the Antakarana, has gained certain degree of tranquility. Krishna Bhagwan talks about the real Shanti later, the Shanti that is gained as a result of meditation and knowledge. In this verse, however, because the person being discussed is a mumukshu, a seeker, the Shanti talked about is relative. The reference to the degree of tranquility one has gained by living a life of karma yoga. We know this by the context, since in the previous verse, Krishna has been talking about the meditator and what he or she had accomplished thus far all of which is conveyed here by describing the person as Prashant Atma. Prashant Atma is one who has lived a life of karma yoga, who has taken care of his or her raga dvesha and is therefore no longer pressurized by them. The one who is not pressurized, pushed by his own ragas and dveshas. Such a person is free from vigata. There are many varieties of fear. Free from fear, vigata bhai. The fear of death, for example, is said to be very common. Fear for some people is in the seat of meditation. When the body is as relaxed as it is in meditation, we generally go to sleep. And there is no fear because there is nobody to be afraid of. But when the body is relaxed and you do not go to sleep, there may be a feeling of going out of the body, which may give rise to the fear of death. And if what is happening is not properly understood, the physical relaxation itself is as though you are going out of the body. Then the entire internal defense system sends out an alarm and the person experiences fear. What is the source of fear? No matter how old you are, there is a fear in giving up the body. Even though you know you have to give up the body one day. However, what is involved here is dissolution of the doer, the karta. This means the very subject, the meditator, is resolved, which is kind of suicide. And because the person does not want to dissolve oneself, there is a fear. In fact, there is no dissolution, there is only resolution. The resolving of the ahankara is also false, because ahankara is Atma, but Atma is not ahankara. In contemplation, the ahankara, the meditator, naturally resolves into Atma. The meditator is Atma. The meditated is Atma. And the attempt is called meditation. If the attempt is successful, the meditator is gone, having resolved into Atma. Therefore, the means and the end becomes one and the same. The meditator resolves into the very object of meditation, as one's attempts meditation. This is the situation that some people are afraid of, because they feel as though they are being decimated or destroyed. Thus, some people see fear where there is no fear at all. They feel as though something is going to disappear and they retain it. In fact, the retention of the ahankara is the only source of the fear. There is the ahankara itself being the source of fear. If ahankara does not want to quit, naturally there will be some fear. This fear then is due to avichara, lack of inquiry alone. The person who inquires is free from fear and is called vigatabhi here. The one who is free from fear is vigatabhi. Vigatabhi can also be taken as a person who is not afraid of tomorrow. A very common fear. People often ask, if I keep on meditating, what will happen to me? Suppose I go into samadhi and I don't come out, what will happen then? Or suppose I get enlightened, then what will happen to me? How will I behave? How will I hold a job? Because the person being described in this verse is a sannyasi. This fear of tomorrow is not possible. But a meditator needs not always be a sannyasi. Therefore, one may have all these fears. Swamiji once read, woman approached to Swami Vivekanand after a talk he had given and asked, did you say that the ego is to be destroyed? Yes, he replied. But if my ego is destroyed, who will run the house? She said, who will do the dishes? What kind of problem arises? Because this is the kind of problem that will arise because of the use of the word destruction. Destruction of ego has to be properly understood. The ego is not really destroyed. It remains even for the person who is qualified to talk about it, but it is an enlightened ego. The I is dependent of the I thought, whereas the I thought is not independent of I. Thus, I thought is already nullified. It is only a shadow I. It is not the I itself. The problem is only in the I. If I thought is taken at one time as I and the other times I thought, then I becomes a yo-yo, now up, now down, now sukhi, now dukhi. Because the person identifies with the condition of one's mind, the person is subject to sansara. To be free of this identification is often described as the destruction of the ego. But if it is not explained in this way, all kind of problems and fears are possible. However, for the person discussed here, Vigatabhi, there is no fear of tomorrow. There is no fear of tomorrow or anything else. The Vigatabhi can also be called Brahmachari Varate sthitah, one who remains with the vows or the commitment of brahmachari. And what is commitment? That implies living the life of a brahmachari. Shankara defines in terms of service to the teacher, guru, sushrusha, eating happily whatever food comes one's way, as alms, etc. Bhiksha annam bhuktayadi. A person with this kind of commitment does not bother about tomorrow and is called a brahmachari. Since Krishna is talking about meditation, the context in which the word brahmachari is used here also implies an emphasis on the study of Shastra. Therefore, it is assumed that the meditator has done a lot of Shravana and Manana. How to live a life of brahmachari? It is also mentioned in this verse. One must withdraw from the various forms of thinking that take place in the mind. Manha samyama. And because one cannot withdraw from them unless one applies the mind to their object of meditation, Krishna says here, thinking of me, the meditator. Sit. Mat chitto yukta asita. Mat chitta means one whose mind is in me. Parameshwara. My Parameshwara chittam yasya. The me, of course, is Krishna as Parameshwara. Parameshwara has two meanings and is common expression throughout the Shastra. It can mean either the Lord as the cause of the world, Jagat Karan, or Lord in the essential form, Brahma, Brahmana, Paramatma. Paramatma is used because the Jiva, the individual who thinks I am Jiva, is equated to Parameshwara, even though there seems to be a difference between the two. In reality, there is no difference. The need for two types of vakyas. The resolution of something, the resolution of the seeming difference is Krishna's Upadesha and the teaching of Vedanta. Thus, the Jiva's prediction as Parameshwara, the Lord is the Upadesha, Upadesha, for which there are two types of statement, vakyas, in the Vedanta Shastra. One kind of vakya reveals the nature of Atma, Parameshwara, and the other reveals the non-difference between Jiva and Parameshwara. The nature of Atma is revealed either by saying that Satya Jnana, Satyam Jnanam Anantam is Brahma, or by saying Satchita Ananda is Atma. In the same revelation, in that both are one and the same, the words that reveal the nature of the self or the Paramatma by implication are always the same. But there is also the equation between Jiva and Ishvara. The equation itself being the Upadesha, the teaching, Upadesha, the teaching. So there are two types of vakyas. Vastu Swarupa Paravakya, a statement revealing the nature of Atma, and Ekatva Paravakya, a statement revealing the identity between the individual and Lord, such as you are that Brahman Tattvatvam Asi, or I am Brahman, Aham Brahma Asmi. The oneness is explained. Etava Paravakya. Ekatva para. Ekatva means oneness. Oneness of Jiva and Paramatma. They are not two different. This is the other statement. The first statement is Swarupa Pravakya. Statement revealing the nature of the truth. Vastu Swarup, nature of the truth. And second is Ekatva Swarup, Ekatva Paravakya. Ekatva is oneness of Jiva and Paramatma, Ishvara. How is an identity between Jiva and Ishvara possible? This may be the question. It is because both Parmeshwara and the Jiva are Satchit Ananda. The Swarup of Atma being Satchit Ananda. This Jiva Ishvara Ekya Vakya, the equation stating that Jiva and Ishvara are one and the same, is valid. If Swarupa of the Atma were not Satchitananda, the equation would have no validity at all. Therefore, both type of Vakyas are important. The Jiva Ishvara Ek Vakya can be understood only when Vakya revealing the nature of Atma are available. The first understanding about the nature of Atma. Only then oneness is understood. In such Vakya were not there, if such Vakyas were not there, the equation Vakya would be meaningless. The Jiva would be Jiva and Ishvara would be Ishvara. When we say the wave is ocean, the water itself must be understood. Nature must be understood. The nature of wave is water. The water itself must be understood. Only then the Vakya talking about the identity of the wave and ocean will be meaningful. If someone says to a wave that thinks it is a wave, hey, you are the ocean, the statement will only be understood by the wave if it has the knowledge of Satya, the water. Satya, that it is water. So the nature is to be understood. The nature of Atma is Ananda. The nature of Paramatma is Ananda. Therefore, Atma is Paramatma. The nature of Jiva, let us not talk Atma and Paramatma. Nature of Jiva is Ananda. And nature of Paramatma is Ananda. Therefore, both are same. Therefore, Jiva is Paramatma. Because of seeming difference, Upadhi, one is called wave and the other is called ocean. In fact, there is no one or the other. There is only one, water. Therefore, together one type of Vakya do the job. Krishna as Parmeshwara, the Lord. Here Krishna uses the first person singular, me, in the sense of Parmeshwara, the Lord. Whether or not the historical Krishna is the Lord is not our concern. We are not talking about Krishna who is the Lord because he talks as Ishvara. Because the word Krishna indicates Parmeshwara alone. Whenever Krishna uses the word Aham, the first singular, the first person singular, Parmeshwara is to be understood. Whether there was a such person as Krishna who danced and played beautiful music on the flute is beside the point. These accounts are stories designed to create certain appreciation of the historical person who walked along the banks of Yamuna as an avatara. Any wise person can use the word aham in same way. Wise person. There are such vakyas in the Shastra, in fact. I was Manu, Aham Manu Abhavam, I am the sun, I am everything, are the statements that any wise person can make. What happened before, what is here and now, and what is going to come later are all Purusha Atma. Purusha, Atma alone. There being nothing separate from Purusha. And who is the Purusha? The one who knows the Purusha as oneself, as that I am Soham. I am becomes free from mortality. Sa iha amrato bhavati. He or she is Atma. There is only one Purusha, and that is Atma. Thus, the Purusha is the one who is everywhere and available only in the heart. The person who, the Purusha is one who is everywhere but available only in the heart. That which is within my heart is Atma. That which is within my heart is Atma is an expression that anyone can say. Krishna is not the only one who can say it. The point being made here is that Krishna always presents himself either in the sense of Parameshwara, the cause of the world, or pure Paramatma. Either way, it is one and the same. The word Parameshwara can be taken as Saguna Brahma, meaning Ishvara, the Lord Shrishtikarta. The one who creates Shrishtikarta, the one who sustains the creation is Layakarta. And the one who resolves the creation into himself in the way of Parameshwara is the Karta. And performs these three jobs simultaneously. All three activities are going on at the same time. At this second, an object is born, and it is born, it is, and as it is gone. Everything is happening within this second. It is cyclic, and therefore we do not know which is first and second or third. It is absolutely at the moment. Is born, gone, is born, gone, or born is gone, born is gone, born is gone, or gone is born, gone is born, gone is born. Either way you can keep on. Gone is born, or born is gone. Nor does it matter, because all three occurs simultaneously. There is no time period into it. Since the whole creation is in time, it is called mithya. Time itself being mithya. In this present second, this microsecond, picosecond, etc., born, or is it gone? It is born. And as it is born, it is going. Going, it is born, which means there is no birth. There is the nature of time, and everything is in time, which is mithya. Meditation on Parameshwara. The object should be Parameshwara. The nature of time is nothing but the trick of Mayavi, of the Maya. Mayavi. Another name for the great magician, Ishvara, who is the agent, Karta of Srishti and Laya. If you absorb your mind in this Parameshwara, it is called Saguna Brahma Dhyana. To do this, you meditate on the virtues of Parameshwara. Thus, for you, Parameshwara is the one who is all compassion, mercy, Ananda. Or Parameshwara is Srishti Sthiti Laya Karta, the one who is the creator, sustainer, and resolver of everything. In this way, any one virtue can be taken in its absolute sense and meditated upon. Or meditation can be in the form of simple prayer. Parameshwaraya Namaha. Unto that Lord my salutations. The word Mata in the compound Mata Chitta also means Parameshwara, the cause of everything. Param Brahma. And that Brahman is Satya Jnana Anantam Brahma. Keep on singing this. Satyam Jnanam Anantam Brahma. There is a beautiful verse. Satyam Jnanam Anantam Brahma. Let me find it for you. Here, the one whose mind is contemplating upon the Swarupa of the Atma, pure consciousness, is called Mata Chitta. With reference to this Chaitanya Atma, there are other revealing words that reveal the Swarupa of Atma, upon which you contemplate. With the help of these words, you contemplate upon the meaning, and this contemplation is called meditation. The meditator is Matapara. The person being discussed in this verse is also called Matapara. Another word that describes the person in terms of the object of meditation. People meditate for many reasons. For instance, the person who meditates in order to lower one's blood pressure may be blood pressure para, but the one is definitely not Matta para. There is another person who meditates for 100% spiritual success, while another does for material success. This only proves that meditation is not properly understood. Meditation is not a technique, meditation is life. Therefore, Krishna refers to the meditator as Mattapara, one for whom the Lord Parameshwara is everything. The mind of such a person will stay with the object of meditation because there is nothing other than Parameshwara. Paramatma to be gained, which is everything. Krishna says that the one for whom Paramatma alone is to be accomplished is called Matapara. Shankara adds here that such a person is very careful in terms of object that he or she desires. For example, the person does not think of a particular woman or man as the ultimate end, para. Instead, one has another para. That is, one's mind is committed to Ishvara, the Lord, as ultimate end. The person who knows the ultimate, who understands, who knows, who has the knowledge of ultimate end, the Swarupa of Ishvara, the Paramatma as the ultimate end. The para is called Paramapada. The person who has this has purely pursuit called Matapara. The expression ultimate end can give rise to another problem if its meaning is not properly understood. Ultimate end does not mean ultimately I will reach there. In the meantime, I have the other ends to reach. Thus, ultimate end is not to be interpreted here as an end to be gained later in time. Link after retirement. The ultimate end is predominant end, meaning that there is no other end. Ultimate end means that is. All other so-called end subserve in the ultimate end. Everything one does is for ultimate end alone. One even eats to gain this end alone, as Krishna says later. The study of Sanskrit also serves the same purpose. The study of Sanskrit is not so that you may become a Sanskrit scholar. You study whatever is to be studied as a discipline, as a means to gain access into what is being taught in the Vedanta Shastra, the ultimate end. Here is not a champion the cause of Ishvara in any way, although there are self-appointed champions who say they want to propagate Ishvara. Surely Ishvara does not need any such help. By the very definition of Ishvara, he should be able to achieve whatever he wants to accomplish. He does not want you to champion him at all. If he wants to accomplish something, he can. He can accomplish it without you. Your commitment is only to understand what Ishvara is. Ishvara, Paramatma, is the only end for meditation. It is the only end. It is the only thing. Ishvara is the only. Knowing Ishvara is the only end. The Dhyana Yoga. Krishna, speaking as Ishvara, says that his or her mind is lost in me. He is Mata Chitta. In the mind of this person who is Mata Chitta, the predominant object is Ishvara. Also, by calling the person Mata Para, Krishna conveys the fact that Ishvara is to be accomplished. In fact, Ishvara is the only end to be accomplished for this person. Both these words, Matachitta and Matapara, indicates the person that exact understanding of what he or she wants to accomplish, to know. In next verse, Bhagavan says the ultimate end gained as a result of dhyana yoga, meditation. Always connecting the mind in this manner, the meditator, the one whose mind is mastered, gains the peace which is centered on me, Brahma, which is in the form of an absorption in me, which is the ultimate liberation. This is what Bhagavan is going to explain in verse number 15. This we will see tomorrow. Om Purnamadaha Purnamidam Purnad Purnamudashyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnamevavasishyate. Om Shanti 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 Hari Om Tat Sat. Om Gurubhyo Namaha Hari Om Tat Sat.